Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is something that in many ways is already going on in many jurisdictions of the Commonwealth, and that is a program called felony mediation. And what that does is it allows persons that are charged, if all parties are in agreement, to enter into a mediation format instead of going through the expense of a jury trial or a bench trial. It's been utilized in some counties, and it's becoming a more prominent thing. In civil courts, it's almost unusual now if a case is not sent to mediation. The more complex part of this case is that you might have cases where you have victims of domestic violence, sexual abuse, things like that that might make it very difficult to mediate. It is not mandatory in any fashion or form. It requires an agreement of the defendant and the Commonwealth attorney after consultation with the victims in compliance with Massey's law, and it then has to be approved by the judge. And it's not binding, which basically means that if the parties do have a successful mediation, they can report it to the court and the court can adopt the findings. If it's an unsuccessful mediation, then they can simply return and have their bench trial or have their jury trial. The first committee sub that I would like the clerk to report, House Committee Sub 1.
Clerk, please report.
House Committee Substitute 1 to House Bill 311.
Gentleman from Boone.
The House Committee Substitute 1 changed the bill a little bit because in the initial bill, we actually tried to promulgate some of the guidelines, regulations, etc., that will be utilized in this process. After discussions with the bar, with several lawyers, and with the Chief Justice, we decided that what we would do is we would just put the mediation form in place, and the Supreme Court then will promulgate the rules, guidelines, requirements, etc., for the felony mediation process. So with that, I would move for the adoption of House Committee Sub 1.
Motion is for the adoption of House Committee Substitute 1. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor signify by voting aye. Those opposed, nay. House Committee Substitute 1 is adopted. Gentleman from Boone.
There's also a floor amendment on this particular piece of legislation that involves a request from various victims groups that asserts certain rights when there are certain types of cases involving domestic violence, sexual assaults, or protective orders are in place. So we worked with those groups, we worked with the persons involved, and we came up with what we believe is a resolution to their inquiries. And with that, I would ask the clerk to report House Floor Amendment 1.
Clerk, please report.
House Floor Amendment 1 to House Bill 311.
Gentleman from Boone.
House Floor Amendment 1 is already indicated as just a resolution of those particular types of cases that might be particularly difficult for calling a mediation for. But we don't want to deny a victim the right to have their case mediated either if they want the case to be mediated. So it has to go through that vetting process. Unless there are questions, Mr. Speaker, I would move for passage of House Bill 311 as amended by House Committee Substitute 1 and House Floor Amendment 1.